Hello, welcome to AT&T ThreatTraq for February 9th, 2017. This program provides network security highlights, discussion, and countermeasures for cyber threats. Today we're joined by Mike Klepper online. And Mike, you're a part of our consulting organization. Tell us a little bit about yourself since you haven't been here for a little bit. And well, first of all, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I'm the practice director for application security, threat, and vulnerability management inside of AT&T Consulting. And we help clients of AT&T keep their networks and applications secure.
All right, very good. And that's the theme of the program here. So we look forward to talking with you a little bit later. We have John Hogoboom here in the studio. And welcome, John.
Always good to be on this side and let you host. All the pressure's off.
Well, you know, we're in a new studio here. You had the premiere experience in our new studios.
Of this new studio. Yeah.
So how do you like it so far?
It's okay. It's not bad.
Yeah, I kind of like this. Don't put a...
We can look at each other more directly.
don't put a rolly thing on the table here. And Manny, welcome back.
Thank you.
And I hope some things are going on this week as opposed to last week, because there wasn't much going on last week.
There's absolutely a lot going on this week.
Very good. I'm Brian Rexroad, and you know what, Mike, we're going to go to you first. And, you know, there are all kinds of little phishing scams going on. I think it's really valuable to get a kind of a good perspective of the little tricks of the trade. So it looks like you have a really good example here. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so in this past several weeks, there's been a non-targeted phishing campaign that's been making the rounds. And that's very important to differentiate between a targeted phishing attack and an untargeted phishing attack, right? Targeted phishing attacks really are very much trying to, and there'll be a lot of data mining that goes on behind the scenes. They're really looking to profile the individuals, the organization, the situation, to give it a lot of legitimacy.
Yeah, you know, actually, you bring up a very good point there, because oftentimes this is one of these, like, it's almost a misuse of the term. Oftentimes they refer to a targeted phishing attack as a spear phish, but more often than not that I've seen, spear phishes aren't really a phishing attack as we define phishing. They're usually trying to send some malware payload and infect the machine so you can get some
open attachment.
Yeah. But your definition is actually correct in the sense that a targeted phishing would be, they do research ahead of time, try to figure out who you are, who you might be corresponding with, and then use that as a means to try to make the phishing more convincible so that somebody would take on it. This is a case where they tend to just blast them out to bazillions of targets and see who takes it. Exactly.
This is very much the spray and pray approach, if you will. And so the focus, or the kind of form that this particular attack takes, is that the victim or the target will receive an email with a PDF attached to it that claims to be an assessment report. It claims to be a secured PDF, and instructs the user to click a link in the body of the email in order to decrypt the attachment. And if you're familiar with secured web mail type of environments where you may not necessarily have access to a third party's network or something like that, such a request isn't entirely unheard of. So, you know, think of voltage email, for example, the one that is very popular, a lot of organizations use. There's an attachment, click here to open, there's some similarities there. So it kind of preys on a little bit of similarity there. When the individual clicks on the link, a pop-up box is displayed and requests their email address and their password for authenticating them. It doesn't matter what is typed into that box. It's purely a solicitation designed to capture those credentials and send them outbound of the environment. So the user, thinking that they have a secured attachment, they enter in their likely domain credentials for their domain there that they're working as a part of, and then those credentials get sent back to the third party who could be aggregating them for sale on the underground or for direct use and compromising that environment. And what made me think about this is very interesting is a couple of things. The first is that as an attacker, you want to try to live off the land as much as you can, right? If you start trying to deploy software, things like that, you heighten your chances to be caught. Using things like this that isn't necessarily deploying malware to harvest credentials, is kind of in keeping with that theme. Also, I saw that as part of the research on this, that the user received different feedback depending upon what the organization in question had installed on the endpoint. So if they actually had Acrobat Reader on the endpoint, Acrobat Reader would check for this and actually throw up a warning message telling the user, hey, something's trying to send your credentials out of the network. Do you really want to allow this to happen or not? If, as an organization that's trying to contain costs and minimize administrative overhead, things of that nature, they're also trying to live off the land, right, with native capabilities into OSs. In Windows 10 with the Edge browser is going to natively use the Edge browser to open that PDF, which does not provide that kind of feedback mechanism. So no error message, no warning message is shown to a user in that case. So, we see here that there's a couple of double-edged sword situations kind of going on. So from a user education perspective, it's important to train your users on really what they should expect to receive and what a secured email looks like and what that process should legitimately request of them, right? So user education always comes into part of this. The other part of this, though, is as an organization, your IT environment, as you are looking at that endpoint and deciding whether or not you're going to, deploy some add-ons or specific point products such as Adobe Reader versus relying on native functionality, really looking at exactly what the pros and cons there are and what those technical features differences are. Because you may be foregoing a few niceties like pop-ups in this case that would warn the user that something might be going on they should care about without knowing about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you described a lot of things there, and I think one of the real challenges here is keeping the user training simple enough that they're really going to grasp what's needed. Do you have any advice around how that should be done?
There's some simple things, right? So, they shouldn't necessarily be expecting to see certain types of attachments originating from certain types of domains, right? So if it claims to be a assessment report about their cat or their pet, it shouldn't be coming to them from a banking domain or some other sort of non sequitur kind of place. If they don't own a pet or they're not aware of any assessment that's going on, these things that seem out of context with their day-to-day responsibilities, that's probably something to be suspicious of as well. From a user education perspective, it's always best to keep it simple. If things, you should be able to provide a short list of maybe, 3 to 6 items that are fairly non-technical for users to check. So if they're getting attachments of some kind or messages that are, out of context from their day-to-day job function, really seem out of place, those are probably, phishing attacks. That's probably not necessarily something that they want to click on. If they're getting, pet assessment reports or something like that from a financial domain, that doesn't seem to be legitimate, right? And then depending upon what type of endpoint solutions are deployed in any particular environment, there may very well be some specific types of endpoint-related security checks that, a user can click on and quickly get a green light or some positive indicator that an email is legitimate that they can be trained on pretty quickly.
Okay, yes, very good. I think that's some really good advice. I guess I'll add one additional thing that is for folks in an enterprise environment. It'd be really good if they know who they should consult with if they get something that's suspicious, and to make sure, because I think one of the things as an employee you want to be cognizant of is that people will feel the pressure that if they don't meet a deadline or something, if they're supposed to do something and and they miss it, it might reflect badly on their employment. So they would need to have somebody that they can consult with if it's suspicious, and to, in addition, report anything that is suspicious so that you can determine whether there's any impact to others in the enterprise. It's less likely it's going to be a vet-oriented, pet assessment type thing as was referenced here, but this is tax season, And we see a lot of tax documents getting floated around as PDF documents nowadays. And so it would be a potential target environment for, I think just about every year we see something, claiming to be IRS, we're gonna garnish your wages or something like that type thing unless you respond to this audit. Not giving any ideas here, but that's the type of thing that the people need to be cognizant of. So this is a good example of what to expect coming soon.
Yeah, and that really does tie in with incident response and making sure that your common users understand. Just like if they're at the airport, right? If you see something, say something, and encouraging a consequence-free culture. That way, even if someone does make a mistake, clicks on this attachment, that they don't then try to hide the mistake and then compound the problem rather than stepping forward, initiating the incident response process, and making the situation known.
Yep. Dwell time is one of the biggest things for incident responders to be paying attention to. That is, even if a problem does occur, that is, how long does it take to discover and deal with that problem has a significant impact on what damage that could occur based on an incident. So it's a very good point. All right, Mike, thank you very much. That's I think a really good thing for folks to be paying attention to this time of year especially. So Manny, you're up next here, and I think we've got a term internally we call hyperautomation, right. And the intent here is to get everything that we can possibly do, get it automated, so that as a practical matter, the folks that are working on things, they have more engaging work to do. Right. We're not doing just rote activities on a day-to-day basis, and it makes for a much more enriching lifestyle. But on top of that, it's a cost-effective way of doing things as well.
That's right.
Everything that's good can be used for bad.
That's right.
So, sure.
So this is kind of there's actually a couple of stories that are involved here, and the first one is talking about CAPTCHA. So so CAPTCHA, completely automated procedures for telling computers and humans apart. And we all know CAPTCHAs, right? So it's that annoying thing that pops up that makes you look at some picture, it's usually some blurry picture of some words that you can barely make out, right? And you have to type in, what you're seeing there, and then usually you have to do it about 4 or 5 times before you actually get it right. And so, so the first part is kind of a cute thing. Somebody posted a video. It was somebody by the name of Matt Unsworth posted a YouTube video showing how effective CAPTCHA can actually be. So he actually had a mechanical robot arm with a capacitive stylus in the hand, and basically was on the mouse pad and just had the robot sort of make a couple of movements when he had I'm not a robot checkbox, and the robot basically goes over, finally gets over to where the spot is, right? Makes a couple little hesitant moves like a human would, and then once he gets to the spot, he has the robot kind of tap it, and you get the little circle and the check marks.
I didn't realize that that's how that worked. So those CAPTCHAs are actually tracking the mouse pointer to see if there's some randomness in there.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it's doing some sort of checking there, and so it's looking for probably some sort of randomness, right? Some sort of hesitation, whatever it may be, and then figures out, oh yeah, there's enough hesitation in there. When he checks the box, that's probably not a.
I know we're on a bad track right away when we start programming robots to be imperfect like humans. But
Exactly. So the video, obviously clearly shows that he was able to fool the CAPTCHA into believing that this robot was actually a human. To which the video ends with the robot moving the pencil away from the laptop and then doing what they call a mic drop. So he drops the pen, and then he actually draws these little funny sunglasses on the robot, because he actually has these squiggly eyes on the robot. So cute. But the second part of this is the story actually talked about this new service that Google is now introducing. It's actually in beta right now, and it's actually called Invisible Recaptcha. So this is supposed to be the next evolution of CAPTCHA. And so in essence, and there's not much, it's in beta right now, so there's not much information about the inner workings behind how they're doing it. But the interesting thing is that it now doesn't use the traditional, like, oh, how is a person moving their mouse? Is it from what I understand, it's actually using everything that sort of Google knows about the person sitting behind the keyboard. So it's actually going in and looking at, like, oh, is this user logged in on another tab on Gmail? Like, do I know this user? Is they, so it's using other things that it knows, history, in the browser, to understand, like, oh, this person usually browses to this kind of stuff. Is this somewhere in that realm of things that this user would do? So it's doing some sort of analytics on the background to understand what is this actually a person or not? And then it, you click the button and it already knows whether or not you're a robot or not by the time you click the button. And so the invisible part is that they really don't even need a button anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So in essence, you can now, and in its beta form, there's 3 ways that you can do it. This automatic binding the challenge to a button. You can programmatically bind the challenge to a button, which in essence means you drop a little bit of JavaScript into your web page, and you can create your own button for somebody to click. Right? And it basically does all this analytics in the background. You click the button and it lets you know. And the other way is actually no button at all. You browse to the website, and the website, as soon as you get there, already knows whether or not you are or not a robot. Don't need the button anymore. So the invisible reCAPTCHA.
Yeah, interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how well this works in different types of situations. But and not knowing a lot about how specifically it's working, it's hard to say how advanced it really is.
Right.
But this is definitely a trend in security that, I think you were talking about something in the previous program, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it had something to do with, you know what it was? It was the sequential passwords. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, if you don't mind, but it had to do with the daily password thing. Right. And it was an attempt to improve the security of devices by having a rotating password. Maybe changing it every day was maybe too much, Right. but nevertheless, the notion is it at least had the right intent behind it. But I think ultimately what that comes down to is a case where there are better ways to do security. This is a case where they thought about security and didn't really do it well, but they were trying to do the right thing. Right. And what I think it comes down to is it's kind of an unfinished solution to a problem. And I think there are a lot of security solutions today that I feel are unfinished security solutions to the problem, where they'll have encryption in place, but then the key management's kind of broken. And if you don't have user-friendly key management, then the encryption's not user-friendly, and then it becomes a detractor of the capability that you're really trying to get to. Right. So getting back on this topic, I think that's where things really need to be going, is to be, maybe you can't get rid of the security checks that are needed, check the button or even type in the blurry text or something like that. I've seen some more that are more cognitive type things where it shows you some pictures and it says, something like, well, pick out
on all the auditoriums.
Yeah, pick the ones that have storefronts or something like that was the one I encountered just the other day. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just agreeing. Yeah, I've seen those certainly become more popular as well.
Yeah, but you don't want to have to use those all the time. And I think that's really where something like this, at the very least, can put you in a position to say, is this a suspicious situation where I need to go deeper? Right. Or am I pretty darn sure this is the normal behavior they've seen? This person's moving their mouse in the same rate I'm used to seeing, and things like that. That you might be able to skip ahead and not be too worried about it. And even just other activity, that is, you're protecting an application ultimately. And if the application is behaving normally, you're not seeing an onslaught of botnet activity. If the new concert tickets weren't just released, you can probably relax things a little bit. So cognizance of the environment as well as cognizance of the specific behavior, I think in combination can really make a big difference. Yeah. And those are some of the things that we're beginning to research as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Google takes this.
Yeah, and like you said, it's with the way that they've set it up now, the traditional sense of the CAPTCHA is still there. So when you fail on the first, so if it thinks, hey, you know what, I'm not exactly sure who this person is, it'll fall back
It
on.
goes to
Yeah.
capture at that point.
I just had a flashback. Do you remember Max Headroom where the guy got stuck in the video and he was sort of the first bot. And I'm not so sure Mike isn't actually a bot.
I remember.
Because we've only seen Mike online, so I'm not there's a chance he's really a bot here. He got the humor though, so I'm thinking maybe.
I'll spare you my Max Headroom impression.
All right, very good. All right, John. So the next item here, I'm thinking Forrest Gump here. He had a sort of a line.
Box of
Stupid
chocolates?
is
What?
as stupid does.
Oh, so you're going with the box of chocolates one.
Stupid does.
Yeah. So not putting judgment. I think that for the most part, these are likely just errors in judgment, or at least errors in understanding the environment folks are in. But dig in, tell us the story.
Yeah, so, and you're right. So I think here's the situation. If you're using any of these big data systems that have kind of been coming to the market over the past few years here, like MongoDB, Elasticsearch, or Hadoop, you might want to pay attention to this story.
Yeah, actually, go ahead,
even
John.
others.
I'll interrupt you later.
Okay. Plenty of time for that. But in any event, so about, I want to say early this month, MongoDB and Elasticsearch, somebody, a bad malicious actor, was going out there finding these unsecured MongoDB and Elasticsearch environments and downloading the data off of them, deleting the database, and then leaving making a new database with a ransom note in it that says, hey, if you want your data back, you got to send me whatever, I don't know if it was Bitcoin or however they asked for it. Last week, there were some reports of a very similar thing happening with Hadoop. However, they weren't even asking for a ransom. They were just going in there, deleting all the data, and then leaving a default directory that said, hey, you're out of luck. You should have, protected your data better. The thing about this that I find, I can understand in a way, and kind of going back to what you started discussing, is a lot of these environments where they have these big data environments are in cloud services. So I might just be a user and say, I need a big data system. It's going to be in a cloud service. I trust that they're protecting it, or they've got some strong security measures around it. But a lot of them are exposed to the internet because that's just the way that it needs to be interacted with by maybe your application that's sitting off to the side somewhere, or other applications. So, as a user of these types of environments, if you are in a cloud environment, you should evaluate who your service provider is.
Yeah.
What kinds of security measures do they have on them? What kind of authentication? And you should also plan to have some sort of good backup plan to back up your data on a regular basis, just in case something like this does happen.
I think one of the things that is really important to point out here is folks that are familiar with Oracle database or MySQL database and some others, they're designed as database tools, whereas Hadoop, MongoDB, they're really designed as analysis platforms. And so they've been softer about the security, and the way by design, they're softer about security. And they're designed to be in sort of an enclave environment as opposed to stuck out on the internet.
Right.
And so if you want to have access to it over the internet, you have to build a security boundary around it. They're not designed to protect the data. They're designed to facilitate analysis efficiently. Whereas you take Oracle databases in comparison, you can be very granular about the security controls as well as just access to the database in the first place. So I think there are two fundamental different philosophies behind the analytical databases and the relational databases that folks need to be cognizant of as they implement this new technology.
Right. And I will say Hadoop and some of these other solutions like Accumulo that is on top of Hadoop in a lot of cases, they open a ton of ports up.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're kind of designed, they're expecting that the environment that they're in is already secured around at the network layer. Nobody else can talk to this thing. I'm not, they're assuming that you're doing the security around who can talk to me.
Yep.
And, Hadoop has at least 5 or 6 different ports it opens by default. I actually have a slide just showing some of that scanning behavior on the next slide that shows, in January, there was a couple of spikes of activity here where there was a lot of scanning activity. It's not a giant amount, not enough that we would ever talk about it on our, the Internet Weather Report.
You can pretty much see this kind of activity on pretty much any port that has ever been associated with an application.
Right.
But this
is just kind of, showing that there are some actors out there specifically looking for these types of services in an insecure state.
Yeah.
Shodan is another good resource. We talk about Shodan a lot. Shodan will actually give you some really good high-level measurements of which ones are out there and whether they're unsecured. I believe they tag it when it's when it doesn't have security controls around it.
Well, and you bring up a good point. We had John Mather on the program some time ago, the creator of Shodan. And he was just kind of trying to create an inventory of the internet. I think one of the things for folks that maybe, say you're part of a security organization and not really sure what is exposed on your enterprise, that's a good resource to go through. And just, you may be apprehensive about using a network scanning tool or something because it could cause an outage and people would notice or something. It's already been scanned.
They've already done
it's
it
already
for
been
you.
done. So use the tool to learn about what's. Any attacker would have that available to them. You might as well see what the attackers had available to them, and if it shows up as something that concerns you, then you can go and start pursuing the specifics on it.
Hopefully, most of the people who had these open Hadoop installations were people who were out there just trying the new, Hadoop's the new thing. Let me go try this out. And they, like you said, they stood them up, right?
Know.
Other than I'm somebody who's really sticking my proprietary data into this database, and now I just lost it.
Right, I'm a $1 billion business, and oops.
Yeah. How many times have you seen a proof of concept platform that turned into the production platform before you even know it? Yeah, so that's something to be really cognizant of as well. As projects evolve, the tendency is that they'll start, even if it doesn't officially become production, it'll become used in ways you didn't anticipate. Yeah. It's we're familiar with the Peter principle, where people get promoted to the point that they can't function properly. It's kind of the opposite of that. There's this what I call the principle of security policy erosion. As you start out with a really nice concept and start moving along, and eventually it turns into just a
sloppy. Holes get created.
So those sorts of things we need to be paying attention to as we progress on the life cycles of projects and systems. So, all right, very good. I didn't have anything directly to contribute today except the interruptions for you guys, but it was a very good conversation. I enjoyed having you here today. And that's our show for today. And we'd like to thank you for joining us. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can contact us at email on ATT_ThreatTraq at list.att.com. You can find AT&T ThreatTraq on the AT&T Tech channel. It's on YouTube as well as on iTunes as an iPodcast. And actually, iPod, or a podcast, actually. Podcast. Here I am. We were talking about iPods earlier. But I got that on my brain. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @ATTBusiness. So I'd like to thank you, Mike, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. Thanks, John.
Yep.
I'm Brian Rexroad. We'll be back next week with a new episode, and until then, keep your network safe.